Hello everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Anthony Peake Consciousness Hour. This is for April 2014, a very important month for me because it's actually my 60th birthday next Saturday. So it's literally the last time you will see me in my effectively my sixth decade, I suppose, if I'm already in my late 50s. So it's quite a surprise. And I was actually discussing this with my wife a couple of days ago. And technically, I'm now probably old. I can't actually call myself middle-aged anymore, unless the fact that people live to be 120, which I think is highly unlikely. I think the oldest person that ever lived was around about 120. So one could argue that I'm sort of middle-aged, and I'll keep believing that that is the case anyway. Just like you guys to know a little bit as well about what I've been up to recently. Last weekend, I was honoured to be invited to a big event at the University of Milan in Italy, where it was the first symposium of the new scientific paradigm, the Akashic paradigm, which was set up by Professor Ervin Laszlo. And it was an amazing 2 days because we had quantum physicists, we had neurophysiologists, we had neurologists, we had astronomers. We even had a guy that had been at CERN and had been involved in circumstances to the discovery of the Higgs boson. So we clearly had some very, very powerful and interesting debates on the subject of the consciousness interface with reality. I'm hoping at some stage in the future to invite some of my fellow guests on that to be involved in this program in the future as well, which is going to make for some interesting areas. Now, our guest today is a gentleman called Herman S Jr. Now, Herman first approached me around about a year ago, something like that, because we have a mutual friend in Miguel Connor, who runs the God Above God website. And I checked Herman's work out when he contacted me, and it really quite intrigued me because a lot of his work resonates with me in many, many levels, and I'm hoping that we'll be touching upon these levels today. But he is a very, very interesting guy, and some of his work is intriguing. I'll tell you a little bit about him here from his website. And it says, Herman S Jr. is a believer in pure energy, in an entity field that has evaded most people's search and understanding. He's a humanitarian and an avid researcher of truth, reality, and human potential. His research consists of him using general systems theory to investigate debilitating individuals and societal problems, while using a multitude of scientific principles to remove these obstacles that stifle human potential. It is his desire to offer these proven principles to those who continue trying to better their lives, yet are frustrated with tears from failure and problems which always seem to hinder their growth. While a member of the International High IQ Society, he is working on his Doctorate of Metaphysical Psychology in parallel with his Master of Arts Degree in Linguistics. Upon completion of the Masters, he begins his second doctorate, a doctorate in Industrial Organization Psychology. This will be a PhD in parallel with an MPsyD. He is currently holds a Bachelor of Arts Degree in Interdisciplinary Studies, an Associate of Arts Degree in Liberal Arts, a Web Visual Design Certification, and an HTML Developer Certification. Since childhood, Herman S Jr. has been an autodidact and a problem solver. He uses the practical everyday of his personal life as well as his professional life, where he has worked in and with companies in various countries across the globe. Herman S Jr. believes in approaching problems from multiple angles of study in order to assess the problems from multiple perspectives to find their root causes, determine long-term solutions, and implement them while contemplating possible variables that could arise in the future, both positive and negative. He believes that this complete process is necessary in order to achieve sound resolutions to problems in any field of study, for example, business, religion, logic, mechanics, the sciences, and other arenas of life. Now, it's a very, very interesting introduction for somebody that obviously has a very, very wide and eclectic worldview. And in many ways, that's similar to myself in the sense that I've always believed that the silo thinking is not the way forward. The way of thinking forward is to actually take in everything. I mean, I was particularly interested with his interest in linguistics because when I was at university, I studied the sociology of religion, and linguistics has always fancied me. Always fancied me? What a peculiar term. An interesting Freudian slip there. Linguistics has always intrigued me. because it is a tool you can understand in terms of semantics and the use of language and how language molds our way of perceiving the world. And I'm reminded of things like the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis and other various ideas of how language structures things. So without further ado, welcome, Herman, and I'm really delighted to have you involved.
Thank you. I feel great being here. Thank you for having me.
Okay. Right. Okay. Well, the one thing I'm really interested in initially is, you know, you're a very interesting guy. How on earth, let's have a little bit about you. How on earth did you end up doing all this? What's your background? And just a little bit about you as the human being.
Well, that would take a long time to answer, truthfully, but the short version, I guess, would be I tell a lot of people that I'm a complete nerd in every sense of the definition. So I've always been one who believes that there's something else beyond what we see since I was a child. Since childhood, I just believed that there was something else that we were not looking at when it comes to problems, when it comes to positivities in our society, that we can do a lot better. And it's just been something that's always been pulling at me, you know, these topics such as issues in religion, issues in society, even issues of medicine and technology. It just feels like we're drastically stifled and we could do so much more. And I strongly believe that it is our mindset, it's our vantage point that we're set up into thinking since childhood through inculcation all over the world. And what we need to do is just reset our mindset, see things from a different vantage point, and see that there is a lot more that we can do in this area, and this area. And from that point, then we can move forward with new ideas, get out of this silo thinking that you touched upon, get into this interdisciplinarianism with using different sciences and fields to solve any problem whatsoever anywhere in the world. So that is, I'll say, what's been the impetus to push me into studying various things across the globe and various subjects across academia. And I believe very firmly that this information, as yourself, should be put out there for the people to see, because if others don't come along and help to push this impetus onto society, onto others, it's going to remain the same. Because the most difficult part of any change, whether it's a societal change or individual change, is to first see the need for the change, of course. And right now, there's no way whatsoever that anyone will see it unless people like you, people like others who do see the need, pushes it onto society and says, this is not right, this is not how it should be, we must change, and it is detrimental.
So where do you think the problem lies in terms of the way in which the larger population don't seem to be really thinking in these ways? What do you think has caused this? You know, what's the sociological issues here that's bringing about these problems?
Well, definitely, without a doubt, in my opinion, the issue that is causing this is that it's just pure inculcation. People are brought up and set to be into a certain mindset due to certain organizations, certain institutions, people that have a good hold on things these days in society. I won't go into specifics, but I'm sure we all know them, or most of them. And it's set up that way for a very reason. For example, I have one friend who's an EDD, a doctorate in education, and he writes about how the education system is set up to create workers, not thinkers. And it's just all these different processes that are put into society which are extremely well established, unfortunately for us, which creates people who are not able to, who don't and are also not able to think in a different manner, to be able to step back and first see the problem. And that's the biggest obstacle, in my opinion. I mean, yes, anyone can change, we can do any kind of changes, but the biggest problem is to first overcome the obstacle of not being able to see the problem. And that's why people such as yourself are needed to push that view onto others and say this is not how it should be, because education system is set up to create workers, not thinkers. You got the medical system, which is stifling different kinds of ideas. You know, for example, if you have, let's say you have a child who's in the school system and that child is intelligent but doesn't seem to, you know, has a lot of questions. Why do we go to church? Why do people, you know, believe this? Why is this? Why is this? What happens is amazing. You get the teacher to go to the parents and say, you know, your child is smart, but he doesn't really fit in with the other students. And the other students are doing nothing else but conforming, and that is the only thing that that teacher is talking about. And if it doesn't change there, then you got the principal involved, and then they're going to go back to the parents and say, you know, you have a good kid, but he doesn't seem to fit in. He's got maybe some social issues, and that is just extremely well established. And because of those systems and many more, it's creating a society that is very good, extremely good, in not standing back and seeing things from a different vantage point. It's just go to school, go to work, get married, have a kid, die, repeat the process over and over and over.
Yeah, I think this is one of the major problems, isn't it, with education, particularly the Western form of education, because clearly we exist within economic systems, and economic systems need people to contribute in a way that will actually keep the economic system going and will keep the circularity of money and everything else going. But effectively what it's doing is it's making people virtual automatons in the sense of independent thinking. Now, one of the things that I find somewhat disturbing when I do, particularly my radio interviews over here in the UK, is that a lot of people ask me and say, well, why do you think about these things? Why are these things so important to you? And I find it quite surprising that, to me, the mind-body interface, the reason why I'm a sentient being perceiving the reality around me and taking into account the reality around me, is probably the most important thing to understand. You know, why am I a sentient, self-referential being existing in what seems to be a universe that isn't particularly sentient in any way? You know, and the only thing I can know with any real certitude is that, you know, to use the old Cartesian idea, I think, therefore I am, you know. And this is all we really know. And these questions are things I've asked myself for ever since I was a child. But a lot of other people don't think this way. The world just is, you know. And I remember one person once saying to me, you know, that on a radio interview, and saying that, well, it just is that way, isn't it? You know, it just, that's the way it is. The world out there, it is real. And of course we know this to be naive realism, you know, it's not the way it is. So what do you believe then, if we can get over this issue, what do you think is the human potential then, you know, across the globe? What potential does humanity have that we're denying ourselves, and how will that manifest itself?
Well, human potential, it's almost a question that you can provide the answer that it's unlimited. Because if you, let's just answer that from a practical point of view. So let's just say we've accomplished, you know, all these different feats that we have. So if we were to overcome this initial step, like you said, the benefits and the things that we can do as a global entity, I'll say, a global society, is all these different feats that we've accomplished, from, you know, creating cars, creating airplanes, and then creating rockets, going out into the moon, creating satellites that can go into the furthest part of the galaxy, and creating all these different things that are phenomenal. Just the internet itself that allows us to do this video call here. All these different feats are extraordinary, especially if you view them from the mindset of when they were first created. These days, of course, to us it's like, well, yeah, of course we have the internet, of course we can do email. But you can't look at it that way. You have to see what each innovation means when it first came out, and you have to compare our society, our global society, to that which was at the time of the invention, whatever invention you're looking at. So you can see all these phenomenal feats that we've accomplished, and we've accomplished them as a divided society. We've accomplished them as a global society that's divided into countries, religions, cultures, states even regional areas. There are so many factions, it's truly ridiculous. And those factions are what help to drastically stifle us. So just imagine if we were able to accomplish all these different feats as a divided entity, I'll just say a global entity. Imagine what we can do if we were all united. I mean, this is going to be idealistic, of course, but hopefully it really does happen one day. But if we were all united, imagine how much stronger we can be. I mean, even if you just look at, even if you're not religious and you don't believe in religious books, if you just look at the stories of the feats that were done, you know, even the Tower of Babel, or really any story, it doesn't matter. The point is a story of human achievement. And all those different stories that came about, and those different accomplishments that came about because society was unified. So if we were to just drop these different fences of, like I said earlier, countries, religions, cultures, and everything, and just see each other as a sentient being like yourself, like you said earlier, a consciousness of sentient beings, then the human potential that we have within us, I'll say it's just going to be ridiculous because it's going to be overwhelmingly positive. Again, that's very idealistic, but that is the answer because there is no limit to human potential. I mean, we've seen, there are medical documented cases, scientific cases of self-healing. People who have had cancers, people who have had all kinds of paralysis, all kinds of different ailments which you swear would debilitate the person for life, if not kill them. There's Morris Goodman, the Miracle Man, who crashed his airplane, I believe in the 80s if I remember correctly, and he was completely paralyzed. His diaphragm ribs was shredded. His ribs were broken, his spine was broken. The only thing he could do, according to the doctors that treated him, was breathe via a machine. That's it. He would forever be a vegetable, no questions whatsoever. And he could hear, but he couldn't communicate except by blinking his eyes. So they developed a system, the doctors, where he could communicate, and he did, via blinking. And he informed them that he would walk out of the hospital on his own by Christmas at that time. And he truly did heal himself. He had this inner voice that you have and you're listening to, Tony. He had the inner voice that I had when I was listening to myself when I was a child, saying there's something wrong here and we have to do better. And he just believed that he could see himself getting better. He kept trying to breathe in. At first he couldn't, he had no diaphragm, but he kept trying to make the attempt. So eventually he healed himself. And there's a trove of information of true cases. None of this, well, I don't know about that. These are documented medically and scientifically. So if we can do all that, imagine if we were to come together with one single mind. At this point, we can't even imagine that. It would be far too much above our own mind to envelop the true nature of human potential as a global consciousness. So there's a lot of stuff we can do if we are unified. We just have to get over that first step of, okay, we do have to be unified.
There is, playing devil's advocate here, there is the counter-argument to say that in many ways the actual stimulus for human evolution, particularly technological evolution, usually takes place during times of conflict. In other words, there is this need to develop technologies, unfortunately normally for warfare and everything else, but in times of strife, when there's a kind of an enemy that is an opposition that we can actually join together against, is something that actually pulls people together. There's this kind of them and us scenario. If we were all, sort of unified together, I wonder whether we'd get, and it is just a question here, it's only a general open question, as to whether we might get a little bit lazy, because there isn't the issues and the problems that we'd have to deal with because we'd be a unified race, as it were. Or would it be that, in your opinion, our needs to just discover and continue inventing would take over, and there'd be this kind of collective belief system of collective humanity reaching for the stars? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, my first answer on that would be that is the answer one would give in this mindset. So if we were of that mindset that is ideal that we're talking about now, perhaps we can pose the question to ourselves in that mindset of a global entity, a unified society, as the opposite of where we are now. Well, what if we weren't all unified? Do you really think we would strive for these things? No, probably not. We'd probably be too busy killing each other and, different factions. We probably wouldn't care. We'd be very selfish and everything. So you can look at it either way. So, but to answer your question, I would say no. I would say that, in my opinion, let me personalize this to the listeners here. If you are able to, I'm just going to make some silly examples here. Let's say you create the mouse, the computer mouse, or the internet, or the TV, or anything. You create some great invention. Typically, that's going to create some kind of rolling effect, some kind of impetus to do other things. You're going to be extremely proud of yourself, of course, and your accomplishments. You're going to want to give that to others to, of course, to make money, but also to help others. You're also going to want to continue in that thought. It's no different than those who experience some kind of positivity, grand positivity in their life, let's say in a day. They want to go out and do more and help others and do things and continue in that manner. So it's just like if someone were to, let's say, get accepted into a PhD program at Oxford or Cambridge or Harvard, they're going to be ecstatic, first of all, and they'll be very happy to help others to do the same. It'll be also anything that's positive that someone experiences, they're going to want to do more. And then if we were of that same society, that same thought in that ideal consciousness there, one can argue, as I would, that if we were of that mindset, we would already be of a humanitarian mindset. We would already be of a mindset that is far more positive than probably we can contemplate right now. And that would be our goal. For example, just being humanitarians such as yourself, such as myself, any humanitarian, we want to help people. We want to help people in whatever area, whether you're a missionary or you write books, it doesn't matter. The point is that you want to help people. So if we can do that now as we're divided, you're sitting there in England, I'm in Chicago here, we have all these different divisions, then imagine how much grander it would be if we were all unified, if we understood that you don't kill people because they're of a different color, you don't kill people because they're in a different country, because they believe something different. We had a firm establishment that we are all one, we are all of one energy, we are all unified, then it's no different, I would argue, than helping your family. You're not going to want to, unless you have family issues, of course, which a lot of people do, you're not going to want to hurt your sister. You're not going to want to hurt your brother. You're going to want to help them, your mother, your father, your wife, your husband. So it would be taking all the positivity that we have now and just exemplifying it. So I would argue that that would be the answer. And someone who argues differently would be speaking in a mindset of where we are today, that's divided.
Intriguing point, yeah, because one of the things as you were talking there, I was thinking about how science itself will be able to help us expand into this kind of almost not necessarily unitary consciousness, because we're not necessarily advocating that, but what we are suggesting is that humanity sees itself for what it is. I mean, I'm reminded of Edgar Mitchell, the American astronaut, on his way back from the moon when he did his moonwalk. And it was intriguing because he was asked a question as to when he was on the way to the moon, what were his thoughts and his feelings as they approached the moon. And he turned around and he said, my great thoughts and feelings didn't take place in the journey to the moon, because when they were travelling to the moon, the Earth was behind them and they had their objective in front of them. And he was thinking of all the things he had to do in order to land on the moon and do all the technical things he had to do. But it was when they were coming back, because they had days and days of just travelling towards the Earth and just looking out of the window. And I think I'm right in saying that one stage he realised that he could actually obscure the whole planet by just putting his finger in front of it. And he realised that all human dreams, all human history, all human art, everything that we have perceived, every single human being in history and every single human being we have ever known exists on that very, very tiny sphere, that blue-green sphere that just sits hanging in space. And he decided that that was the message he was going to bring back, and that's why he set up the Institute of Noetic Sciences, IONS, and set everything up. Because I think it's this realization that we are one. Effectively, humanity is one. And again, I'm reminded of the fact, of the way in which more and more of us are interfacing with each other here on the web. We are using Facebook, we're using other kinds of social media. And what is happening is that people are seeking out like-minded people. In other words, whereas ordinarily you'd feel rather isolated in the way you saw the world, but nowadays, you and I, Herman, can actually discuss like we are doing now and sharing our ideas with other like-minded people who will listen in and will say, no, I can buy into those ideas. The danger is that just as we are linking in, there will be other interest groups who will be linking in with finding out their own particular worldview. So in which case the superhighway, the cyber world we live in now could be both a positive thing for a unification of human thought, but it also could be a negative thing initially because it could be divisive. So how do you think science can help in this overall thing that you hope will happen with human beings? What can science do to help us in terms of this?
What I think science can do to help us in being more unified is, well, first let me preface this with something. You have to be careful with using science. I am adamant, such as like yourself, with using the sciences to prove pretty much anything that I research and that I write about. So I do want to say that sciences are the best way to go about, in my opinion, because you can say, no, this human potential aspect is true because of this. This aspect of the human mind and self-healing is true because of these sciences, and it's proven scientifically. But you have to be careful because science is not able to understand everything thus far that we've experienced. It can't understand certain things if it cannot be tested in a laboratory environment. So that doesn't mean that those things that you are querying, that you're pondering, are false. It just means that right now we are not at the point of being able to prove certain things via our sciences because of our fault, because we're not there, we're not advanced yet. It would be, if you talked with quantum physics, if you talked to any scientist before the discovery of quantum physics, if you were to tell them anything under the umbrella of quantum physics, they would definitely laugh at you, throw you out, ostracize you, whatever. I mean, you would be made a fool, that's for sure. But now we look at it as like, no, all these weird things that do occur really are true, and they really do occur, they really are factual. We do have the different experiments and data to prove it. So that's what I want to preface it with. You have to be very careful, but at the same time, you want to be very careful not to just accept anything and say, well, we just can't prove it right now, because then you're no different than the person that goes around spewing religion or new age ideas which are really logically unfounded and or scientifically unfounded, and you go back with the default excuse of, it's true, but hey, you won't know, we're not there yet to prove it. So you really have to be careful. With that said, to answer your question, The sciences that we have thus far to prove everything, to line us up for more unified consciousness, is grand. There's a plethora of different sciences that are out there, a trove of evidence of sciences that are out there, of experiments done by prestigious universities. We're talking about Oxford, we're talking about Cambridge, Harvard, Stanford, Yale, all these different universities that have touched upon certain phenomena, various phenomena throughout history, and such things such as, any kind of phenomena that someone would question, is that really true? Phenomena such as out-of-body experiences or other things. I don't want to be specific here, but other things that are questionable, where a typical person, especially a scientist, a hardcore, snobby scientist, would say, oh, that's just nonsense. And that is a huge problem, which is detrimental. It's inhibiting a lot of our growth. You have an extremely intelligent and very powerful academic entity that is deliberately and going out of their way attack different phenomena. And if you were to go down the street and just ask people, do you believe in whatever phenomena you want to talk about, ESP or out-of-body experience? I'm not saying it's true or not true, I'm just posing the question. There are a lot of people, I'll say most people, will say, no, that's a bunch of nonsense. Well, how do you know that? Well, I've never experienced it. Have you looked at the research? Have you looked at the research that's out there that's for and against it? No. 99% of the time you're going to come across, no, I haven't, but, my mom told me, or, this guy on TV said so. They're not looking at things from a different vantage point. They don't have that, like we talked about earlier, that impetus to go out there and see things for themselves. And it's not no one's fault except those institutions which are creating these processes to create very forcefully, or very firmly, a society of workers and not thinkers. So if you were to look at the sciences, they are out there. They are out there. There are thousands of experiments that are out there of stuff such as phenomena, such as what I said earlier with Morse, the miracle Goodman, with self-healing, Dr. Joe Dispenza, the quantum physicist, all these different people, Dr. John Martini, the doctor, the medical doctor who was a speaker on human potential as well. All these different people who have troves of evidences of experiments of this is true because quantum physics proves it, this is true because hyperdimensional physics proves it, this is true because of this, whatever it is. So the information is out there and it's readily available. The only problem is that we have to create the impetus for people to go out there and say, okay, this must be different. So back to your question, science is a huge tool of being able to say, no, this is true, because right now we do have the science to say this phenomena is true, out-of-body experiences are true. Whatever it is you want to investigate doesn't matter. So, and for those that we don't have the evidence for, it's extremely important to be very careful and divorce yourself from any bias that you may have and say, okay, we don't have the science right now, but extrapolating on this science, or this form of logic, whatever it is, or this form of management principles, it doesn't matter. Extrapolating on something, it is likely, or it's probably not likely with the information we have thus far. But if you do come at phenomena with the aspect of sciences, it's going to be far more valid, obviously, and it's going to help you to defend yourself and defend your beliefs when you are out there saying, we can do this, and you are attacked by the skeptics, and more importantly, by the academic skeptics who are well more versed in science than you are.
I think you've touched upon some very, very important points there, and I know you touched upon the quantum physics level in one of your essays that's on your website that I read a few days ago, which I thought was very intriguing and very much in keeping with my own philosophy on this. That what tends to be happening here is that the vast majority of people, if you speak to the person in the street, or you speak to your workmates or your associates, or the person down the pub, the person you meet in the bar, And their knowledge of science is very much based upon the science of 115 years ago. You know, the idea of the old Newtonian principles, the old way in which the world was seen in the 1890s. And I'm reminded of was it Alfred Michelson who turned around and made the famous statement, something along the lines that, you know, all we need to do now is to actually define the universe by to the 6th decimal point and we'll effectively know everything. And of course, at that time there were certain issues of science such as black body radiation and various other things that, and the photoelectric effect, that really could not be explained by science. And therefore, you know, in 1900 Max Planck comes along with his quantum theory of energy and everything's up for grabs again and it all changes. Now, most people aren't aware of this. You know, they still believe that there's the solidity of the universe we perceive, you know, that the chair you sit on is solid. Well, of course, we know it isn't solid. The only thing that's actually keeping it apart is the energy within the chair that's keeping you above it. Now, if people then realize this, and it's a point you made in your essay, which I think we can also discuss now to move into, is this idea of holism, and the idea that if you look at the superposition of particles, you look at the Alain aspect experiment of the early 1980s, you have the Bell inequality, you have the idea that particles themselves are related to each other in a much deeper level of reality. And again, this is hard science. You know, it's one of the things I find frustrating is people will dismiss what you say and consider it to be woo-woo science, when in fact it isn't. It's actually the real science, and it's evidenced many, many times in experiments, time after time after time, that it's illogical to modern people. And I very much use the example, and I'll say, well, you know, the way you see the world is the way in which the medieval schoolmen saw the world, with their Aristotelian worldview. That, you know, that it's a world-centric universe and everything revolves around the world, when in fact it's not the case. And we're discovering more and more now that the world of quantum physics is moving more and more into the macro world. You know, there's this idea that there's this big line between quantum physics and the quantum world and the nice world of the safe world of Newtonian physics. But of course we now have things like Bose-Einstein condensates, which are actual things you can physically, I think I'm correct in saying, you can actually physically now see in a microscope a Bose-Einstein condensate. And of course you can see one in a laser. And what these are lots and lots of subatomic particles working together in unison, and in doing so are actually having quantum effects taking place in our universe, in our worldview, in our big world. So this is telling us that intelligence and everything we perceive actually has a deeper level of reality. Now, this is very much metaphysics, and it's bringing metaphysics into science. And I know that metaphysics is very much a subject close to your heart. So, in one general question then, do you believe that this actually proves that metaphysics is valid?
Do I believe that this proves metaphysics is valid? I am extremely careful with using that word. It is a word which is vehemently and deliberately attacked. But if I were to come out and bluntly answer your question, yes. Well, it's funny that you said, not funny, but interesting that you said that a lot of people don't believe this stuff of quantum physics, and you get this look, at least inside yourself, if you don't let it come out onto the person you're talking to, of, are you kidding? This is academically proven. So the quantum physicist Dr. John Hagelin, he's a wonderful guy, and he actually touched upon this. He said while he was in an interview that quantum physicists do not like to talk about certain things, a lot of things within quantum physics, with people who are non-academics or not scientifically sound. They don't have a good foundation in science. Because if they speak of these things, whether it's Dr. John Hagelin, Dr. Fred Alan Wolf, Dr. Quantum, or Dr. Michio Kaku, it doesn't matter, the reaction is just, there's not even a reaction. It's like a deer in the headlight look of, are you kidding? You know, it's, the people can't even grasp, if you're not used to quantum physics, you can't even grasp your mind around about understanding certain aspects, which are completely proven, as you touched upon, in science. And that is, in my opinion, that is because people are just too, it's a matter of those wonderful institutions and organizations that are keeping human potential and keeping society stifled. It's creating distractions of this ridiculous, reality television shows and, this idol and that idol and, whatever it is. But television is a distraction. All these different things is distraction. Facebook nonsense of, oh, I saw this cat with 3 legs today. Let's post it and have everyone talk about it for the next week. It's all these different distractions which are set up in a very good manner. They're highly laid out and very firm. So all these different things are going to keep people from researching things that may help them to begin to be pushed in a different manner. So that when people such as yourself that are extremely well educated talk about certain things, you are looked at as a fool. You are looked at as, okay, who is this guy? Dr. John Hagelin, all these different people who are highly respected, highly prestigious, and it's a tactic that is, it's a result, of a tactic of distraction. There's the old PSYOP, psychological operations, a military tactic, that is divide and conquer, and that is so powerful. A lot of people don't understand it. If you were to take a great entity of people, such as our global society, and divide them, that's the first step you must do in order to bring down any group of people. You have to divide them if you do it strategically here. And that is where we are at. We're divided in, like I said earlier, religions, cultures, countries, states, cities, all that stuff. And it's going to create it's going to create a limitation. These people can only achieve this kind of, perfection or, stability or whatever it is, because they're divided. But if you were to take those divisions away and let the people unify and achieve different kinds of achievements and a human potential, it's going to be far grander. So because we're not there yet, because we have all these different distractions of television and everything, which are very firmly and strategically placed, it helps to ensure that people are not studying science, they're not studying math, they're not even studying, world history or how the educational system came about. The educational system came about not to educate people. It came about to create workers. That is it, if you look at the educational system history. So they don't know these things, so it's not anyone's fault, again, aside from those institutions, but it's a truth that we have to deal with. And it's a truth that we have to unfortunately overcome, and it's extremely difficult because you have people who are, like I said earlier, who are very intelligent, very well educated, highly respected, such as yourself, such as the people I mentioned, Dr. John Hagelin, all these different people who are looked at as fools by, the common people. And until things change, it will continue to be like that, guaranteed. So that's why I was saying in the beginning that the first step and the most important step is to help people see that this is not correct. This is not how we should be. We can accomplish far grander things if we were a unified entity, or even before we get there, before we're a unified entity, we can accomplish far grander things as a person, as a family, as a culture, as a city, if we are united, and then from there go on. It's no different than any addiction. An alcoholic, a drug user, they cannot change unless they first see the need to change, and a lot of times that is the most difficult step beyond any other step that they will undertake to overcome that addiction, whatever addiction that is. So you have to present information in some manner. You have to think about what's going to be the most effective way to present it to people who are of this kind of psychological mindset so they will see it. And it's no different from the teacher who has a student who is struggling. Since childhood, I believe very firmly that a student is never at fault for learning something. It is always the teacher's fault. If the teacher is able to communicate on a level with that student that this is something that they can enjoy, this is something that will help them, this is something that they like, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. They can draw some kind of parallel of, this is how it relates to whatever the kid likes, video games, wrestling, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Then that will start to catch the child's interest. And then from there, they can move on and learn. So that's something that, people like us have to do. We have to see how people can have an interest created, and then see things from a different angle, a different vantage point, and say, okay, you know what, you're right, I didn't know that, but now I see that this is the way we are going, and it is not the way to go. We must go at a different angle, whatever angle that is. And for different people, it will be a different angle.
Very much in agreement with that, and I'm reminded of the opening chapter. I don't know if you've read Quantum Enigma by Rosenblum and Kuttner. They were two, well, I know that Bruce Rosenberg is professor of mathematical physics at the University of California, and when they wrote their book, Quantum Enigma, they were particularly trying to write a book about the mysteries of entanglement and superposition and all these things. And in the opening comments, they say that their peer group, their academic peer group, turned around and said, why on earth are you actually writing a book such as this? Because it's writing that kind of material for the general public is rather like trying to give a child an atomic bomb, in the sense that they believed that the hoi polloi would not necessarily understand and grasp the concepts, or if they did, they would misunderstand them in some way. And it leads me to think, is there some form of conspiracy of, not silence, because that's not the case. I mean, this material is out there and it is readily available, but there is this kind of conspiracy to not really point it out to people in the way it should be pointed out. I mean, I'm relieved over recent years. I mean, Michio Kaku is a classic example, and there's various guys over here in the UK that have done a series of TV programs. For instance, there was one on a couple of years ago called What is Reality? And also there's been programs on time perception and various other things. And I'm wondering whether there's this kind of drip release of this information, because it is suddenly realized that, this is too important for people to not understand it. Now, I readily accept that a lot of the understanding has to come from very, very esoteric mathematics, and therefore to use these things by analogy and to explain by analogy something that is a mathematical truth is quite difficult to do. And there is the grave danger that people will misinterpret a lot of the evidence from quantum physics, and a lot of the New Ages, and particularly the slightly flakier end of New Ageism, will actually bring it into kind of disrepute, because they will get hold of the wrong end of the stick and suddenly say, oh, this proves all kinds of weird things. But the reality is that quantum physics is weird, and it says something very, very strange to us about the existence, the universe we live within, and what it is. So in which case, leading on then to that, what do you think this tells us about the existence we live within? Is the reality we live within, is it a mind-generated illusion? Is it a collective creation brought about by the collapse of the wave function? Or is there something more to it? What is, in your writings, what do you think it's what it is?
What I think this all is, existence, creation, the world, whatever you want to say, I think that the first line of my bio would give that answer, my opinion, I should say. I believe in an entity, an energetic entity that has evaded many people's search. So I believe very strongly in all my research of sciences for 18 years, all my research of religion, languages, all kinds of different things, that there is I'll say, an underlying energy that is unifying us all, because we are all that energy. And my answer is no different than the science that's in quantum physics or even just regular physics. You know, everything is energy, whatever it is. If it's the rock, if it's the table, if it's me, if it's you, everything is energy. Everything, if you break it down, if you were to look at a rock, if you were to look at, you know, a person and look at it that by a microscope, or whether it's an STM or any kind of very powerful microscope where you can drill down to, you know, the cell level, then down to the atomic level, then down to the quantum level, down to the Planck level, you'll see everything is the same. The differences emerge at the macro level, like you were touching upon. Quantum physics is going into the macro side, which it should. But the differences at the roots level is nothing. Nothing. Not a single thing. There's no difference. We're all energy. We're all frequencies. Sound is frequency. Sound is traveling all over. The light is traveling all over, enabling us to see. We are traveling all over. All we are, all creation is, all of everything in creation is just energy. And there is an underlying field of energy, whatever you want to call it. If you want to call it just energy, God, mind, God, whatever term you want to use, that's irrelevant. Whatever is comfortable with you, that's okay. But the science proves that without a doubt, everything is energy. That's you cannot argue that. So if you were to extrapolate on that, then you'll see that we are all unified. We are all of one thing, whatever that thing is. In this case, whatever that, I'll say energy. Because when you go down to everything, you know, we're born, we live, we die, we all are always entities of that field. So I think that proves it very simplistically and very elegantly, actually, that all these different things, us, you know, these inanimate objects are linked. We are all of one thing. And quantum physics is just phenomenal because it has come about at a great time of the New Age movement, of all these different things. Not the flaky New Agers, but the scientifically sound New Agers. And it is perfect because it explains a lot of different things that sages were saying millennia ago, that, you know, religious people were saying not religious people, but spiritual people were saying millennia ago. It's just that back then we were telling them that they're crazy because people who were educated, people who were academics, who were scientifically sound, didn't have the science to look into what they're saying. So that's why I said earlier, you have to be very careful. Using the sciences to prove certain things is, in my opinion, a great way, if not the perfect way, to prove certain things such as human potential and phenomena and all that stuff. We have to be very careful because there's certain things that we can't prove. Just like back then, before quantum physics, we were saying other people are crazy for saying these things. We're all unified. Yeah, okay. You know, we're all one. Okay, whatever. You know, but now we're there and we're saying, oh, they were right. You know, now we have the science to prove it. So all these different things are coming into play at a perfect moment. Well, I hesitate to say perfect moment because it'd be better if it came earlier. But so what you were touching upon with quantum physics not really being known and not even being able to be grasped earlier with the book of Quantum Enigma, in my opinion, it could be that there's a dripping effect, a drip effect of let this information out, this information out, this information out. That's possible. My opinion is that it goes back to the very carefully placed deception that's out there to make sure that people are engaged in music, are engaged in athleticism, are not that any of these things are bad, but they're engaged solely in these things. They're engaged solely in spending whatever 14 hours or 10 hours or 5 hours playing video games on the computer, playing, you know, watching reality shows, all these different things, whatever it is, it doesn't matter specifically what it is, but it does matter in that it's taking time away. It's distracting a population that has become more intelligent and has become more versed in what we need to be versed in, such as a new age movement, a healthier lifestyle movement, all these different things. So it's not that we're a society of people who are just staring out the window and just have a zombie face, but we're not far from it because of these systems that are put into play that are making sure that we're in the same mindset. So I believe that it's the distractions that hold people back from believing these things because they're not able to go out and research the little things, maybe a little bit of science here, maybe a little bit of science here, that can then lead them forward and say, okay, actually this is true. So that's what I believe about the underlying entity. The science is all there to prove that, and the reason why we don't see it is because of the distractions. Because can you imagine if we can accomplish all these different things, these wonderful feats that we've accomplished so far, and can you imagine if we were all unified to whatever degree, 100% would be great, but let's just say 50, 75%, how different would our society be? So many things would collapse. I mean, religion would collapse. The economic system would collapse. Definitely capitalism would collapse. And all these different things would collapse, and we would have a society where is better in that we're more advanced, we're more uplifted, we're more, spiritually apt, I'll say. But it's going to be a system that certain people won't like because it's going to release their control onto the people. And it's well in their interest to make sure that doesn't happen.
One of the things, and pick up on one of your points though, which I know that my listeners will know that I'm fascinated by, is this idea of, at a deeper level, we are all effectively one entity experiencing itself subjectively. And I'm reminded, of course, of the famous Bill Hicks monologue about this, but also the works of people like Martin W. Ball with his entheological paradigm, and also Bernie Heisch with his book, The God Theory. And the idea that at a deeper level of reality, everything is unitary, everything is one, it's completely non-dual. Because, of course, most people, well, I can't speak for most people, but one of the things that stunned me many years ago was coming across the fact that all reality, everything we perceive, every single bit of the universe is effectively created by an up and down quark and electrons. Affecting themselves within various forms of energy fields, the weak field, the strong energy field, the electromagnetic field, and the gravitational field, the electromagnetic field. And that's all there is. There isn't anything else. So effectively, the multiplicity of things we perceive around us are effectively made of three objects, an up and down quark and electrons. And of course, when you look at electrons themselves, they're point particles. Now, if you start reading up exactly what we mean by a point particle, that's exactly what we do mean. They don't seem to have any extension in space. They are just a kind of a blip within an energy field. So then we look into the vacuum field, and we look into the quantum vacuum, the 0 point field, and the idea that everything is just fluctuations within the 0 point field, or they're just parts of vibrating strings that are actually existing in, 11 dimensions was the last thing they came up with. So here we have the reality, the illusion of a reality, and the illusion of separateness. The idea that somehow there is space between these things. But of course space is literally this, what Ernest Mach said, is space is empty. Space is nothing. The only thing that makes space is the objects within the space. So here we get into some very, very deep philosophical concepts. So then the billion-dollar question that I'm dying to ask you now, is that are we human beings ourselves, our own supreme being? Are we just manifestations of the supreme being manifested within this illusory reality?
Good question. I like that. Let me answer that from different perspectives. As a metaphysician would say that we are all creations of a single, whatever you want to call it, fill in the blank, single God, single energy, single higher power, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. So that would be their initial answer. Now, if you're going to talk to someone who is not into metaphysics, but they're of a sound mindset, they're going to say, you know, well, we are all different creations and we are all ourself, but we are all unified into this one different energy. So some may say that, you know, we do have our own life, we do have our own will, but we're all unified at the basic level. So when we die, some may say that's it, as far as our personality and our characteristics. But our energy continues to go on, of course, because you can't destroy energy, nor create it. And so there are different answers to that, but what I do want to say is the unifying answer is that there is some kind of energy at the basic level of everything, of everyone and everything, and it is we are manifestations of that energy. Now, from there is the division, from what I see in my research, is the division of we're really not our own beings. We're really just an extension of a certain energy, mindset, whatever you want to call that thing. The other division would say, well, like I said earlier, we are our own selves. It's just that we're getting this certain time frame, whether it's 1 life, 2 lives, 1,000,000 lives, whatever it is. But once we die, that's it. And there's no more personality, there's no more characteristic, but the energy goes on. So there's research and evidence for both fields of thought. It just depends on which one you vibe with, but which one resonates with you. But the main important the main important part of that question, I believe, is to see that we are all unified. There is an underlying energy. It is an intelligence in that it is aware of I want to be very careful here. It is aware that it is energy, that it is creating manifestations, that we are all that energy. But you can argue that awareness, that intelligence, is all of us at the basis of that energy. But the important point about that is that we all need to see that we are all unified. As we've said many times in this interview, we are all unified. We need to get out of this ridiculous, asinine mentality of division where it creates all these different conflicts. There is no time, there is no space at the lower levels of creation. Time and space is an illusion. It's so interesting that the higher you go from the plank level, from the string level, from the basic level of creation, the higher up you go, the more problems come in. You have problems of skin differences, religions, cultures. You have problems of we believe in time, we believe in space. There's no such thing. What exists is one eternal moment. That's it. And as we go forward in quantum physics, we're able to see these things. Quantum physics is a beautiful science, in my opinion. It proves so much stuff to the minds of the skeptics that just believe that this was all nonsense. It proves beyond a doubt for the scientific community and all the skeptics, all the ones that are wondering, is this true? What are we supposed to do? The ones that are crying at night saying, how can we be more unified? There's a trove of evidence that is out there. It's just that people don't go out and see it. And quantum physics is showing that all these different, I'll say stupidities, if you allow me here, at the macro level, which is where we exist, they don't even exist. They're only manifestations of entities who are at the macro level where there is a creation of division, such as time, space, skin color, and everything like that. But if you go down to the lower level, there's not even time, there's not even space. Quantum physics proves that there's not even a concept of time and separateness. We're all together, we're all unified, we're all one, and there's no such thing as, 5 minutes ago, because things happen in the present that affect the future, things happen in the future that affect the past, and that's not some kind of conundrum where it's like, how is that possible? It only is so to people or entities that are at the macro level who can't understand that, because we are inculcated to believe that there is division, there is science, there is space-time separateness. So if you were to look at it from a different mindset, you can see that is true, you have no problem in understanding, well, yeah, of course it's true. It's no different than things that we believed in the past, such as, geocentrism, where the Earth is the center of the universe. At that time, if you were to talk to anyone who's educated and say, well, no, the Earth is not the center of the universe, they would look at you as you're crazy, and they couldn't help to understand our mindset that we're at right now when it comes to geocentrism. But if they were of a different mindset, whether it's 50 years after they believe that or today, it doesn't matter. They can say that, and not only that, but they can say it with a smile and say, of course. So it's just that the problem that we're not advanced that far yet to be able to see these things. And one of the reasons why is because of these distractions and these inculcations. There is, if you were to look at the different evidences of deceptions, misdirections, misinformations, it's just, if it doesn't make you sick, it would scare you into all the different practices that are out there because of certain reasons, certain institutions. Again, I never go into them. But the point is that all this information is out there for anybody to see, for anybody to take advantage of and to spread and disseminate to others, to show that we can be a far better universe, global entity, well, universe as well. We can be a far better unified people. And if you were to use the sciences with an unbiased mindset, not to prove what you want to prove, but just go wherever the sciences lead, especially quantum physics, you'll be aware of many things that you thought were just not possible, that scientists are still questioning, but they only because they come from a different mindset, but the evidence doesn't allow them to question it anymore, at least. So that's what we need to do. I mean, we need to go back to understanding that, we are of a different mindset, and we need to be open to a sound, not nonsense, not garbage, but a sound, logical, scientific extrapolation of different things, of different sciences, which will help us lead into a better mindset, into a better understanding of something, whatever that something is that you want to understand. And quantum physics is here to help us. All these different logical principles are here to help us. You have systems theory, you have general systems theory, all these different things that are available to anyone who even is not that well educated. All it takes, the only thing it takes, is an impetus, a push to move in that direction. And that brings us to the beginning of the interview, where that is the most difficult thing, and that is where we need to focus our efforts on and show others that the evidence for quantum physics is out there, the evidence for this is out there, the evidence for this is out there. It's just that we need to find the angle that reaches the most people.
Wow, fantastic. That really, I think, put it in a nutshell, exactly how we should be thinking now. And Herman, that was quite a wonderful final comments there. And in fact, I've just noticed that we're actually about to run out of time. And I think it's evidence of how interesting the discussion has been, that it seems to have been about 5 minutes rather than an hour, which quite amazes me, because clearly there's so much to talk about in terms of the overall discussion here. I'm sure that my listeners will be more than interested in actually checking your work out and your website out, and I've spent quite a time on there, and I find it enthralling and fascinating. So can you tell them where they can contact you, where you're available, your website, your book, various other bits and pieces that I'm sure that the listeners out there will be keen to know about. So let them know now. That'd be great.
Yes, thank you. My website is similar to yours in that it's very active. I always am very conscious of keeping it updated with all my research. So the website is actually a portal. So if one were to find out any kind of information about me, the website is the perfect place to begin. It does and will continue to hold all the interviews, all the articles I release, all the information. It will be there for people to go to and see, okay, is this really true? Whatever information they might find. And that website is www.hermansjr.com. That's Herman, Herman, S like Sam, Jr for Junior, www.hermansjr.com. And it will, as I touched upon earlier, it will always show all the information, everything that I do with my research. I'm always open to collaborations, working with different scientists, with different metaphysicians, with different people who are not of a science background, but of an artistic background, a management background. It doesn't matter. I'm always interested in working with people from different vantage points, because when you achieve a result with people from different disciplines, it's far more solid than people who are of one mindset. So all that information is there, the book information is there, and as a matter of fact, starting June, I am creating an online magazine, and the first edition will be launched this June, either June 1st, June 31st, and it is a collaboration of various writers, various artists, various musicians who are writing on the topic of human potential. So we're all writing on human potential based on some kind of sound principle. Whether it's an extrapolation of logic or certain specific science, it doesn't matter. And most of the people writing are at the doctorate level. Some of them are not. Some of them come from an artistic background, music background, like I said earlier. And the point of that is to get as many people writing about it from different disciplines, because that's something that's, of course, like I said earlier, far more sound than something that's written about just myself, or written from just myself, or written from 5 people who believe my mindset. So you got EDDs, you got chemical engineers writing about different things in that magazine. It's going to be launched. It's going to be a biannual magazine. And I welcome anyone, if they're interested in collaborating on that. I'm very open to doing that, and I'm always open to conducting more research, whether it's a presentation, a speaking engagement, or a book, with someone to help push the aspect of human potential. And anyone can always get a hold of me via my website.
Wonderful, and I know that I didn't get around to responding to you on your offer for me to contribute to your magazine, so my apologies about that, but I'd be more than happy at some time in the future to do something for you. And I'm sure that a lot of listeners out there, and I know there are many people within my extended group that are very, very keen to have their ideas out there as well. So, by all means, try and contact Herman on this, because, as an online magazine here, it could be something that would be really useful, that it's across various idea levels and everything else, and this is profoundly important, because it's only by mixing the ideas together that we can really come up with something substantial. Well, thank you very much. I really, really enjoyed that, and I felt it was more like sitting down my favourite pub and having a beer with a friend and discussing ideas, and I felt that, we just didn't have enough time. But we will do it again, I promise. Right, okay, just to let you folks know that the next broadcast will be recorded for the May show, when we've got out-of-the-body experiencer Graham Nichols back. The interest in Graham's work has been quite profound, and I'm really delighted to have an opportunity to actually talk through his ideas again with him. And as I keep saying time and time again, what we must do at some stage in the future is get all the guests together we've had here to have some kind of fantastic conference, symposium, whatever it may be, because the ideas that get spun out from this Consciousness Hour show are just absolutely phenomenal, and we are really getting some great guests and some great ideas, and I'm just very, very humbled and honoured that people like Herman and various other people want to be on this show. And again, as always, I'd like to really thank Dia Nunez in the background there over in Denver, because without Dia, none of this would happen. And again, I'd like to stress my ongoing thanks to Dia for what she does. Okay, until next month and the next broadcast, be careful, keep thinking, and we know that the new paradigm is just round the corner, and we're all part of it. Okay, thanks everybody, and thanks for listening in. Thanks, bye-bye.